So we're here to talk about the power of race analysis, which is very pertinent at this point in the season. Okay, we're coming into a time where we've done a lot of hard work. We've banked a lot of blocks of training. Coming up for kind of 6, 7, 8 months of a decent graft in the pool to get to this point where we step up in the summer and we support our athletes in swimming their best swim when it matters. And we're going to talk about how we can use race analysis as a reflective tool to maximize the value of those racing opportunities. So a quick snippet about me. Some of you may have had the experience of chatting to me before and through the platform, through different bits and pieces, but I've been in swimming in particular for about 18 years now, going on 19 years, and I've been working across roles, strength conditioning, performance science, consulting, and a few other bits as well in project land. I've been very fortunate to work with some really great programs in the university sector, in British swimming, over in Swim Ireland in a leadership role, pulling things together with some great people over there. And I've just moved over to the Queensland Academy of Sport in Brisbane, working with a program in East Brisbane with Vince Raleigh and doing some other project work with these guys. So that's really exciting. And I founded Swimming Strong amongst doing other bits and pieces, just to try and make tools that are normally accessible to only the elites, the kind of performance centers, the programs that hold all the budget, to make those tools more accessible to coaches in club settings, where for me, there may be a restriction in terms of our time availability, our budgets, but there's no limitation in terms of the effort and passion from coaches and also the ethic that's being applied by athletes. And I think it's really important that we make tools that are normally restrictive more available to support the sport across all levels. And through that as well, we've teamed up with Dr. Eva Pietrkova, but more within the physiological profiling side to achieve the same goals and making things accessible. So the challenge we have with Insight in swimming is we train lots, but we taper and race infrequently. We don't have many opportunities to really see where we're at, when suited up, when benefiting fully from super compensation. And I think it's really important that we get as much as we can from each racing opportunity, because that information should be what drives us as coaches, as supporting practitioners and athletes, in terms of where we can apply the effort, the focus, and the intelligence in our training in the next block. Race analysis itself is really time consuming. I know better than anyone, having run the system in Ireland, being involved in the development of that platform from scratch. It requires a lot of manpower, a lot of resource, and it's ultimately not feasible for the majority of clubs. And that's something that we want to address. So this presentation, there is a commercial aspect to it, but I've tried to make this as educational as possible. So even if you do not run with our race analysis system, these are things that we can think about and apply in our daily training environments. Of course, the cost of employing an analyst or licensing software such as Dartfish and the rest can be a real barrier. And reports can be very, very difficult to digest and often lack really clear insight in utilizing benchmarking or comparisons to just tell us what we need to be working on. And we're going to look at a case study later in the presentation with that in mind. So the power of race analysis, what we're trying to do is look at what is changing between racing opportunities and training opportunities. So we're going to use data to support that, and the types of data and the profiling we're going to use is we're going to look at velocity profiling across systems. We're going to look at rating our deficits using simple colors. We're going to look at our stroke mechanics, our tactical comparison, and our breakdown of skills. We're looking at all those things in combination, and we're using visuals to make that more digestible. And one thing we do at Swimming Strong that's a little bit different is we have 6 standards of benchmarks that are live, that are constantly updated. And those are at the British National, European, and World Junior and Senior standard. So it gives, for me, any 14-year-old, 13-year-old, 15-year-old aspiring national level swimmer something to shoot for, just as it would give somebody who's trying to qualify for a team, hit a FINA B, FINA A time, European junior team spot. There's really a range of benchmarks there that allow us to, determine what we need to do to get to where we want to be. And it's going to help us to train with purpose. That's really important. So our system works quite simply by you upload a video or submit a request for analysis. We do the hard work. We do the really grindy bit where we've got a team that sit down and click lots with a mouse and use some temporal metrics and calculations to extract data. You guys can then look at those reports and I'll show you what they look like, set very powerful goals and train with real purpose. And that's our tagline. We're trying to use these systems to really support you guys in making the right decisions. Sorry, Tom just got jettisoned from the call, so I'll let him back in there. So breaking down racing, we have three things that make up a swim. And the weighting of these as a percentage of what they represent by time is determined by the distance of the event. And then we've got all of our wacky stroke parameters within that. So the start becomes a diminishing proportion of an event as we go up and up in distance, with things kind of plateauing off of the 400. So obviously start is a really big deal, representing 25 to 30%, if not even more significant statistically in a 50-meter event, but only representing less than 5% of the event in terms of time to 15 meters off that single start element in a 400. And that's not to say it's not important for a 400, 800 or 1500 swimmer. It's just proportionally, there are other things we may want to hang our hat on. Conversely, the swimming piece increases in terms of how much it represents of the race as the distance increases, and that's an obvious one. Turns are right in the middle because we've got multiple turns, and that means there's always a consistent lower body explosive, high velocity underwater hypoxic and breakout task. And this represents an increasing proportion of the race as we increase the distance of the swim. And for me, that's really exciting because it means that when we're looking at our distance swimmers, we're not treating them as totally separate athletes. We're still having to build in lower body strength and power into their programming from a strength training piece, but also they have to be great at those skill elements from a technical and a swimming piece as well. So this graph for me just shows you the interplay between those three different elements that make up swimming. And of course, all of these are underpinned by a medley of different physical, technical, physiological descriptors that we're going to talk about now. Velocity profiling is something I want to introduce to you. Now, some of you may be aware of this from using the system from seeing previous presentations. But really what we're doing in swimming is we're trying to cover a distance as quickly and efficiently as possible, given the constraints of the stroke. And when I look at the swim on the left, which is the athlete we might be working with, the purple line, and we're looking at somewhere we want to be, which is typically a higher velocity aspirational benchmark. What we're looking is where the distance between those two lines occurs. And as you can see here from this example, when we have a gap between those two lines, there's a bigger red bar. And that bigger red bar means it's an area of opportunity or something that we can potentially address with either a tactical, technical, or physiological intervention. And this is just a way that I think it's very useful to think about swimming, because what looking at the race from left to right in velocity terms does is it removes our reliance on time basis, which is still a very, very powerful coaching tool, but it makes each segment of the race proportional when we're doing a reflective analysis. So for the swimmer here, you can see starts a bit iffy, where there's some really good stuff going on in that first 50-meter swim. And actually each swim segment is pretty good until we get to the last 50-meter swim of this 200 backstroke, where things are really going badly awry, and we're paying for potentially a tactical over pacing, over effort issue earlier in the race. But apart from that, there are some real positives. There is some good swimming speed there. It is maintained for 150 meters of the race, but there's definitely areas to work in within the start and the turnout kind of segments, and we'll talk about the underpinning things there. The next part of the race analysis report that we use is we're looking at a stroke mechanics chart. And this is almost a visual tactical comparison. Where we're looking at, is our swimmer on the top, who we're working with daily, are they swimming it the same way as the best of this European junior top 3 sample from 21? We've actually updated these benchmarks since, but the trends in elite junior and senior swimming are pretty consistent. So what we're seeing here is we're actually seeing a similar kind of execution pattern, and we'll have a look at this in live on the platform. But towards the end of the race, this last segment, this athlete is totally unable to pick up the rate to maintain the velocity. And we're seeing that interplay between energetics and efficiency really hurting them here, in terms of they cannot achieve this pickup, even sacrificing DPS, because it's about what you have left to maintain velocity as well as you can throughout the race. And that even weighting of back end front end swim velocity is definitely something that is required now to swim a 200 back at elite standard. So that's another bit of insight we're getting there. Now, time is still important to us. We're able to look at temporal metrics in terms of the skill segments, block time, reaction time from start signal to leaving the block. We're able to look at our break time, time to 15, our turn average segments, our turn break time, and our finish time. So that's some more information if that's the kind of benchmarking you use in your program. And then we get a breakdown in terms of distribution of swim from end to back end. For the swimmer here, again a bit uneven because of that fade, and we're also getting a really nice summary of time, stroke rate, DPS, stroke count, and stroke index. So that is a lot of info there, and we're able to look at just how those variables change across the 50-meter segments and the 200, 400, 800 and up, or the 25-meter segments and the 100, and we'll be dealing with one of those in the case study. So we can see here there's a consistent lower DPS, so inefficiency earlier in the race, which suggests they're overworking, and then an inability to actually pick up the rate and maintain velocity towards the end of the race. So they really are slipping and falling apart in this last segment because the stroke rate's not far off those top 3 European juniors, but they're just unable to move quick enough. So for me, that's quite insightful. So there's 3 parts to goal setting derived from race analysis. We've got the tactical side of things, which is related to how is a race executed, how is the effort distributed across the segments of the race in order to make sure we utilize as much of our available physiology as possible. But also, how are we executing the skill segments in terms of our underwater kick count? Are we transitioning well into swimming at the right time that suits our strengths or weaknesses underwater? Are we executing the start effectively? Are we controlling the variables we can control, like angle of entry, positional factors? Technically speaking, yeah, we have those elements being executed, but under pressure, are we consistent in our technical execution, or are we unstable? And that is something that is very much reflected from the training setting to me. And I got a very good example of that coming up in, again, I mentioned the case study. And then we've got the trainable piece, and the trainable piece for me is really important, because if these aren't evenly weighted, we spend a lot of time on the trainable qualities, and those are things such as our physical attributes, mobility, coordination, strength, and power. Things that we can change, such as lean mass, such as our relative strength and power through augmenting those variables, and of course our physiological qualities, which are tied to our physical qualities. If we make an athlete stronger in the gym, if we add lean mass to them, it's likely their anaerobic capacity is going to go up, and that is going to have an effect on their output in the water and how they should and can swim a race. So there's a lot of interplay here, but ultimately swimming is a highly physiological and technical sport. Those are 2 very important things. And I think we have to look at the physiological rationale for what we're doing, and we can derive that from race analysis and expand on that understanding using tools. So, and the point of this is we have to be effectively designing training programs that change the variables that are going to support performance improvement. And that is something I think that makes us all tick. So when it comes to the start, I'm going to give this overview. So we have physical and technical factors attributing to start performance, and rough weighting based on research. If we're looking at a kind of meta-analysis of all the bits and pieces out there, pulling that together into a single model, 60-40 weighting there. So we're connecting the physical with strength, power, and mobility. And really those are affected in pool preparation work, especially coordination and mobility, and also our strength conditioning program design. There's lots of ways. So this outer ring here are things that I think there should be a degree of freedom with each coach in terms of setting. So S&C practitioner or the swim coach, if they're in charge of this domain, we might be hanging our hat on a back squat repetition max in traditionalist terms. We might be looking at how fast we move 80% of that rep max to represent our strength speed. For power, we might be looking at our height of our counter movement jump with arms. We might be looking at our peak power output. So there's a relative factor in a static vertical jump. Whatever those are, whether we're looking at how many single leg pistols can you do, an isometric pull, a singular jump task, a depth jump, there's real freedom in order to achieve training outcome in this outer side of the ring. But we are trying to impact start-related strength and power to support the physical execution and output on the block. And of course, these are underpinned by mobility as well. And the three areas of mobility would be our streamline, of course, on entry, once we're in the water, that's massive. But also we're looking at elements of squat pattern mobility, our lumbar ability, thoracic extension. Again, whatever these are and however we assess them, I think there's real freedom for the coach to pick that, but it's important to know what we're going after. And then the technical aspects, we're looking at coordination on the block, our entry distance and time to 15 meters, ultimately contributing to the technical component of start. And again, this is just an example of how you can break this down. This is using an application called Goalscape, which we'll look at in a bit more detail within the case study. So term goals, physical and technical factors, again, fairly even weighting on these. And there's a lot of overlap here, and this is the efficiency of strength programming within swimming, is that a lot of the things we're working on in start are going to benefit us in turn and vice versa. But there are some peculiarities in there in turn, depending on the stroke. We've got some rotation, we've got probably more of an approach being considered within that 5 meter in phase, overhead squat and streamline mobility. Counter movement, so we're adding a reactive or an elastic component into our jump task, and we're probably looking at relative power in that area as well. And then turn related strength, you may be looking at absolute lower body strength and strength speed again. So there's some good overlap there. And again, as I said before, as we increase the distance of the swim, this stuff stays important. So the fact we're training a swimmer well for turn means we're training them well for starts, with some specifics in that start category for a 400, 800, and 1500 meter swimmer. But these guys need to be able to explode off the wall with excellent underwater, carrying high fatigue later in a race. That is something that all of the top swimmers are very, very good at. And when you see that fade on turns, it really hurts overall performance. Swim goals, if we break that down, are more complex. There's an interplay between technical and physiological factors. And as I said before, these are huge. These are huge in swimming. The physical side of kind of stroke or propulsive output, so we're looking at DPS, stroke index, maintaining those with an increased rate, are fairly well related in freestyle, front crawl, butterfly, and backstroke swimming, because they're more upper body driven. And I would say that our pull-up repetitions, our pull-up maximum strength, and our pull-up velocity and power tasks are really important there, especially relative, because we're having to carry our body with us in the sport of swimming in a way that's more taxing than others. And then we've got our streamline and rotational kind of mobility when we're looking at freestyle. And again, technical factors, which we can distill down from race analysis. What is our peak velocity? What is our average velocity? What is our stroke index? And then we come to the bit that's going to be very important to the athlete we're going to deal with, is our anaerobic fitness. And again, we're using the 3MT system as reference here, our D prime, size of that battery in meters, and aerobic capacity, which is our critical speed in meters per second. And there are other ways to assess swimming-based fitness. Of course, there are. We've got step tests. We've got different types of profiles. But physiology for me is something that we need to be able to compare reliably, and we'll come on to that when we deal with our case study. Okay, so we're going to talk about a swimmer I've worked with for a while now, and I've got a lot of time for the swimmer because he came to London to have the student experience, and COVID happened and he was locked in his room for a year, and he really wasn't able to do much for a good year of training. And his name is Brian. I've got his permission to share his data with you. He's a senior swimmer now, and he's more than happy for this story to be shared with you. So Brian's a 100 butterfly swimmer, and he was coming in with a 53 mid to high kind of PB, and he's aiming to make the Olympic team for Malaysia. And going back to 2022, he swam a 53.32. And what we're doing with the swim, just to show you how we roll through the platform here. Once I've submitted a request for analysis, the athlete will become available within the platform. I'm able to then select whichever swim I want, and I can do a comparison of that swimmer to those 6 levels of standard. And as I said before, it's British, European, World, Junior, and Senior. Brian's aspiring for world-class success. He's aiming to get a 51.8 ultimately next year to put his hand up for Olympic qualifying. And this is what his, this was a late 2022 swim. I think it was August, September time, Malaysian representative meet. And we're comparing him to the top 3 average from World Seniors 2022. So that's fast swimming. We're looking at a comparison here of a 53.32 to a 50.68. But why that's relevant is Brian's looking to get within a couple of seconds of these guys. And this also gives us a really good sense of where the areas of opportunity are. So this velocity profile, which we've discussed before, we can see that Brian has some mostly red throughout the profile. And his start was an area of concern for me, along with his turn in from a technical point of view, and his turn out. And those are real areas of weakness. And we won't worry about going into too much detail. There were some issues with him tactically in terms of how he was executing his swim and putting it together. There was some real variability, overrating, underrating. He wasn't swimming it in a very steady or well put together way. But ultimately, I think that was because he was reacting to poor start and turn elements. And also there's a physiological picture under Brian, which will become quite relevant. So what we have here with Brian from this this September 22 swim is a real deficit in start and turn. And we made this a priority for intervention along with building his total fitness. Came from a really, really low volume program history, and also came from a very interrupted time where he was swimming potentially 5 times a week during COVID, or doing spin and maintenance work in his university room. So fitness well out of whack coming into the kind of 9 to 12 months before this. So we ramped up the gym program to support lower body strength and power. Jump height baseline average of 3, using gym aware was 49 centimeters, you know, in the amber, and velocity based rep max on the squat was 102.5 at 73 kilos body weight, because he is a smaller guy for the one fly. And we were constantly giving him technical, tactical kind of like coaching at every racing opportunity in between. So what happened with Brian was we then swam him, and this is an interesting kind of story. So we then swam him at the British Senior April meet there just 2 months ago. And he had swam some stuff in between, but his PB was kind of sticking. You know, we hadn't had much rested swimming. This was tail end of last season, long season. So following that intervention, we sat down as a group and we agreed that we were going to really push on start and turn. And his start has actually become a bit of a super strength now. Slightly unexpected, the jump in that, but with some real focus, it's moved fantastically. And his turn has also become more of a strength now. But what is being left behind is we're seeing this fade in his stroke profile. So we're seeing he's off pace in his first 50 into the turn in. We need to still work on that. And And he's also showing a fade in terms of getting further away or slower towards the end of the race, okay? He's actually swimming it tactically a lot better. We can look at the interplay between stroke rate, distance per stroke compared to these guys. And for a smaller athlete, he's probably giving up half a foot in height and up to a foot in arm span to these top three. He's actually swimming it probably in a better place where he has to be higher rate, but under control, with the exception of this first 25. So we're able to start looking at how the tactics and the rest are coming together. The other piece we were able to do with the system was we're able to compare Brian's swim from British Senior. Now, this was actually a slower swim. Well, that's a really important point to make. This was 53.48, but it is a swim in April off the back of a late long season course finish and some rest. And he swam, let's see, a 53.32 in September 2022. And this is only a 53.48 in a morning swim at British because that's all we had. But there's some real positives here, and I'll continue the story. Some real positives in terms of the things we wanted to impact. So we were really happy with that. The other thing we can do with this system is we can compare Brian's swim from British to his swim from that long course meet in 2022. And we're able to see the kind of magnitude of improvement relative to those two swims, as well as the reduction in difference between where we were in a better place and what have we actually changed. So there are some real positives here, but still some things to work on with the swim. And that led to us to start looking at the physiology. So within this snapshot here, we're able to resolve some of those deficits within start and turn. And then we moved to adjusting the gym program to focus on swimming output while maintaining and dropping the session count on lower body hits. And this is where the fitness exploration began, because it's all well and good making an assumption that we've moved things on using pure strength program, but he's been doing a lot of good training at the same time as this. So what we looked at prior to this racing opportunity was we ran a 3MT profile on Brian on butterfly, and we were able to get his critical speed stroke specific. And for those who aren't too familiar with 3MT testing, we swim a 3-minute effort all out, okay? And from running some validated modeling on this all-out profile, we're able to get two numbers. That this is a whistle-stop tour, and Ava's talk next week will deal with this in more, in much finer detail than I can. But we're able to get his anaerobic capacity, which is his D prime, the size of his battery, the number of meters he can swim all out before his anaerobic and phosphocreatine systems are depleted. And we're able to get his critical speed, which is the speed at which he can swim indefinitely utilizing only his aerobic energy systems, okay? These are two really clean, sexy numbers in swimming. Okay, so we thought, right, let's have a look at this and overlap it with this racing opportunity. And what I would say with Brian is his critical speed is significantly underdeveloped for what we require from a 100 fly swimmer. And his D prime is actually quite overdeveloped. And that probably pays testament to the type of responder he is, also his training history, but also his misconceptions over the type of training he needed to do and how poor he was at controlling intensity on specifically fly swimming efforts. So let's cue forward a little bit. Now, Brian has just swam the Adam PT meet. That would have been about 2 weeks ago, roughly exactly 2 weeks ago, just before I came out here to Oz. And he swam a PB. He went at 52.9, really well put together swim. I don't have the analysis on that meet, but what we do have overlapped with that is we've got a fairly recent snapshot. So for the 4 weeks preceding the Adam PT meet, we were able to grab a snapshot of his 3MT fitness on butterfly again. And even though from here in March to May, we had been swimming him quite extensively, trying to develop his critical speed actually dropped to 1.1. So if we're saying that 60% of our performance in a 100 is determined by D prime and 40% by critical speed, his D prime is actually too high for a 100 fly swimmer because it's gone up another 10 meters. And part of that is because we did quite a lot of racing into British. We had quite a lot of repeated hits. We had some racing off the back of British. We didn't have much time off. But we know between these two tests now that Brian is an A1 responder to anaerobic training. So between this 3MT, backed up by the fact that we knew he had a physiological focus from his race analysis, he was doing some very, very pace-limited, extensive and controlled fly work. A lot of it with fins. For example, 10-1s on an easy or a safe critical speed level, and repeating that set 2 or 3 times a week with fins on fly. And off the back of 4 weeks of this work where we really limited him, he PB'd. He went his first ever 52 point. Start and turn based on time splits were as good as they have been. And now he's within a second of his Olympic qualifying time. So this is just an example, obviously using the system to explain the thought process in the background of how we can use race analysis to identify an area of need, address an area of need, and then evolve an area of need into other areas. And ultimately, it's going to come down to if there is a physiological deficit with a swimmer, which there are with most of them, there is a tool for that. So in summary, for Brian, let's see, we did use Goalscape to manage his program quite well. And Goalscape allows you to really explore where the areas of opportunity are. So when we're looking at how complete or how much of a goal is representative of the total, we're able to, using a combination of experience, insight, collaborative approach, we can look at Brian and we can say, actually, we've really progressed some of these areas. Okay, we've moved on his strength. His jumps moved on massively in terms of supporting his start power. We still have things to work on in the mobility domain, which are a priority. But right now for Brian, if we look at his swimming, it's his physiological profile is really the thing that we need to work on. His aerobic 0.225 shy where he needs to be a world-class 100 butterfly swimmer. So that means that a lot of these things will go on to maintenance, especially in the strength domain, while we work on that capacity. 2 seconds, guys. I think we just had somebody, drop out, and Dale's back in. So that really is a whistle-stop tour of how we can use race analysis to achieve a few things within swimming. It's going to support our coaching decisions, or it's going to remove the noise or reduce the lack of confidence in what we do or do not know we need to do. And that for me is absolutely vital. I would rather be doing less stuff that is more important to the athlete based on the requirements in racing. I think that's an important evolutionary step for swimming to take. And our mission is to make these tools more accessible to coaches. So whether you take from this, it's a little bit of a philosophical piece. It's going to challenge or confirm the way you're thinking. I want you to know we have tools available to help you and your team really connect the dots. And a big part of that is the education and community we're building up around the system. So events like this, we record it, it'll go online, it'll be issued out to anyone who's expressed an interest for free with the system. And I think the value in a report is it's broken down into clear areas, underpinned by that velocity report. We're looking at tactics, technical and trainable headings. And there has to be that why behind every kind of intervention or every ask we're making on the athlete. There has to be a rationale behind it. And that's going to help us individualize and also achieve buy-in. And a huge thing for referencing Brian is he came from a 20-25K training background doing only intensity and speed on fly. He believed that's what he had to do more of to improve. But showing him, cold naked evidence in terms of his underdevelopment in aerobic capacity and critical speed has really, really helped us get him on board with doing stuff that he is not good at and doesn't enjoy, but not because he doesn't need it, just because his perception was somewhere else. And I think it's important that every coach and program can implement their own system, but setting clear goals is really important to crystallize the efforts of the team. So, of course, if you want to engage with the system, and these slides will be sent out via our socials, feel free to sign up for a free account. We've got demo login credentials there where you can, explore a few example data sets. If you want to create your own account, then please go ahead and do that and you can start linking up your athletes, and just drop me a line if you have any questions. We can process your own footage from iPad or phone, or we've got an archive of footage that we can let you know what we've got. For example, we've got all the British, English, a few other European competitions filmed in our archive. And obviously we've got racing coming up now. So anything that's swam British standard is available. That's published on YouTube, and we use that footage with an uninterrupted stream for analysis. Otherwise, if you can point an iPad or a phone at the pool, we can analyze that just fine. Within 72 hours, our analysts will do their job, and you'll get a wee heads up that your report is available to look at and support your coaching process. So yeah, there we go. That is hopefully 40 minutes of informative, interesting, and comprehensible information. And we've got a little bit of time for questions now, if anyone has popped anything to the box, if that's a feature that's possible. 2 seconds, guys. I'm just opening the chat. Oh, Tom cannot hear me. A little bit late in the presentation for me to address that. I'm really sorry. So yeah, anyone want to stick up their hand with any questions? Otherwise, we can leave it there, and please reach out to me individually by email, john@swimmingstrong.co.uk if you have anything to, anything to query me about. Okay. Chris is typing a message, and Matt, fantastic. Okay, so Chris has asked, with Brian, did we balance the critical speed training development with anaerobic work concurrently? Yeah, we did, but what we did was we polarized it much more so. So he was just touching speed and avoiding over intensification on fly specifically, because we knew that's where the win was going to be. So we used the pace prescription system, which is an offshoot of the system that is too much to go into for now, but Ava will deal with that next week. We just made sure his speed stuff was super short and super high quality without too much of a drift from his peak pace, and that everything looked great visually. We used video on the speed work, and then we used fly with fins for the majority of the critical speed work, underpinned by freestyle. So we almost came away from doing what you would call VO2 threshold production, because we knew for Brian with a D prime of 52, he didn't need to do that. He could stop training and his D prime would go up. So we didn't need to add more stimulus in that direction. And we got a 0.4 second PB within a 4-week block. And what was really exciting about that was the combination of race analysis and 3MT profiling in a fairly short window to adjust that athlete's program. Hope that makes sense, Chris. That's great, Matt. No, Chris has obviously used this system extensively, and he's pretty experienced with it. Speed reps were decent rest interval, but we were down kind of doing progressive 15, 25 up to 35s, probably only touching 50s as final rep and rest in the set. So a lot of 15, 20, 25, 35, 50 type distance work, but not, with a long rest and really not putting too much anaerobic pressure or not depleting the battery too aggressively there. Okay. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Apologies, you're all muted. That's how the call's been set up, but look forward to chatting to you all on poolside. Well, probably not in the Northern Hemisphere, but let's keep in touch and just shout if any questions. Thank you, guys.